Hello, thanks for joining us. It's a lovely evening in New York City. If you're watching online, drop us a comment below and give us your thoughts on today's news. Here's today's top stories. Hiring has slowed down in states reporting more virus cases. We have details and analysis. There's debate in Congress over whether businesses should be protected from COVID-19 lawsuits. It's a big topic. The US government makes a deal with two pharmaceutical companies for up to 600 million doses of a potential vaccine. Companies say we could have the vaccine by the end of the year. And home sales have made a record jump. Super low mortgage rates and an increase in people working from home are counted as some of the reasons. Small business hiring is slowing down in states with rising virus numbers. It's bad news at a time that we need all the hiring we can get to help kickstart the economy.
A report by scheduling firm Homebase found that after 2 months of steady labor market recovery across all states, there's now a split between states. Those that reopened earlier saw their rising work hours reverse course and fall again several weeks ago. The reversal roughly coincides with a rise in COVID-19 infections in those regions. In the initial pandemic phase, the hours worked trend line for Arizona, Florida, and Texas experienced a much smaller drop relative to Massachusetts, New Jersey, and New York, where the outbreak was more severe and restrictions more pronounced. In mid-June, the measure of hours worked in Arizona, Florida, and Texas was around 17% higher than in Massachusetts, New Jersey, and New York. Now that difference is only around 2 to 3%. According to a Johns Hopkins University tally, there are over 3.9 million confirmed cases of COVID-19 in the U.S. and over 142,000 deaths. Homebase's report comes ahead of the Labor Department's weekly jobless claims. Last week's numbers showed elevated levels of unemployment claims, raising concerns about the economic toll from a spike in COVID-19 cases. Recent consumer sentiment data is furthering the concern. Citing a widespread resurgence of the coronavirus, the University of Michigan Consumer Sentiment Index dropped from 78.1 in June to 73.2 in mid-July. The report said to expect more declines in consumer sentiment in the months ahead.
We caught up with Tom Ozimek earlier to get his thoughts on the report. Tom, you studied the report today. Was there anything else that stood out in particular?
Yeah, I think what's interesting to look at is the hiring dynamic when you compare the jobs posted versus the number of applicants for those jobs. So shortly after the pandemic had its most intense impact on the labor market, so that would put it around mid-April. There was a surge in the number of applicants per job posting, whereas you saw a decline of overall about 75% fewer job postings relative to the first weeks of March. Now, what you've seen recently is that the number of job applicants for the job posts out there has fallen steadily, in fact, falling to levels below pre-pandemic levels, even though the number of job posts has been rising. So there has been what appears to be an increase in interest on the part of companies to hire workers, but a declining number of applicants overall. What's also noteworthy is that this report comes on the heels of the initial jobless claims figures released by the Labor Department tomorrow. And expectations are that these will remain largely flat compared to the week previous. While the overall trend has been that of a decline in the number of initial jobless claims off their peak in April, the overall number of Americans receiving unemployment benefits remains elevated at about 32 million. Now, compared to the same period in 2019, that's the week ending June 27th, there were about 1.6 million Americans receiving unemployment benefits. So the scale just goes to show that when you compare those two figures, the 32 million versus 1.6 million, that the labor market still has a ways to go before we can really talk about a meaningful recovery, and that there are challenges ahead.
And in these states that we've seen the hiring slow down, do you put it down to fear of people going back to work, or do you put it down to maybe lockdown measures being reintroduced or scaled up?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of factors. Certainly fear of a resurgence is one dimension. Another is probably a sense of discouragement among job seekers, where the sort of realization has set in that there are simply fewer jobs out there. There's a sense of discouragement has perhaps settled in. Another possible factor is the relatively generous unemployment benefits, the additional $600 per week that were introduced by the CARES Act. Now that's due to lapse in July. There's been talk about extending that or phasing it out. So perhaps when that form of disincentive from getting back into the labor force kicks in, we'll also see a rise in the number of applicants per job post.
Tom, thanks so much for the update.
Thanks, Paul.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has finished a draft of a new virus aid package. Republican senators are still debating the specifics, but they don't want to see any wasteful spending in a package that could reach over $1 trillion. McConnell's plan is expected to include a new round of direct payments to low-income earners. It's also likely to have some version of President Trump's payroll tax holiday for workers. The previously implemented $600 weekly unemployment boost and housing relief measure ends next Friday. It's unclear whether these will be extended. The Treasury Secretary and the President's acting Chief of Staff are expected to head to Capitol Hill for more negotiations. What may be a sticking point between Democrats and Republicans is whether business owners will get protection from COVID lawsuits. It's a big topic. Emel Akan in D.C. has been investigating. Emel, thanks so much for coming on. This is an interesting topic. As a business owner trying to reopen, the last thing I want to think about is for somebody to sue me because they've caught COVID-19 or something related to that. But there is debate happening whether or not to give immunity to business owners. What exactly is the debate?
Yes, Paul, you're right. This is going to be the next sticking point in coronavirus relief package negotiations between Republicans and Democrats. Republicans made it very clear that this protection, liability protection for businesses, is one of their top priorities in the next relief package. Democrats, however, oppose it. They say they wouldn't support it. And they've already passed a bill, as you know, a $3 trillion relief bill the House Democrats passed, and that included enhanced protections for workers, the so-called OSHA rules, emergency standards. They want this to be applied in the workplaces. This is an important issue for companies, Paul, because they are afraid to be sued by employees, by customers, and they have no protection. And President Trump on Sunday also talked about it and said that he wants to see he said that he wanted to see a certain protection, certain liability protection for companies, and this is important for safely reopening the economy. And he said that he accused Democrats for opposing it. He said that they are captured by a lobby of lawyers. So this week, what is the expectation is that the Senate Republicans will release their relief package this week, and the negotiations will soon start. And I think this is going to be one of the major debates in Congress. And as you know, we have a strict deadline. Important programs are going to expire by the end of the month, and it's important to see if they can come to a conclusion on this topic.
And what exactly is the Democrats' rationale for opposing this?
They think that, for example, Speaker Pelosi told last week that protecting workers is already protecting employers. If employers adapt important standards, emergency standards at workplace, they will be automatically shielded from liabilities from lawsuits. So this is her explanation, and they think that the companies do not need protection.
And of course, who knows, even if everything is in place, somebody gets the virus. I believe this is what the president was trying to say is, who knows where this person caught it, but then they'll file a lawsuit against a particular restaurant or business or something like this. What exactly are the business owners saying?
Yeah, I spoke with small business owners as well as lawyers this week. One small business owner from Ohio told me that he's confident about applying the CDC guidelines, washing hands, social distancing, taking temperatures. He's very confident about protecting 200 employees in his workplace, but he's not comfortable facing bad actors, the low firms that are trying to take advantage of the situation. So he strongly believes that there should be some kind of protection for businesses. And I spoke with another lawyer in New York. He also said that since virus is a new thing, we're not prepared to it, and it's very unfair for companies to face this kind of burden. But when you talk to unions, labor unions or employment lawyers, they oppose this protection. They say that this is kind of taking accountability away. And if people cannot sue businesses, that means they will not be accountable, and that will promote reckless behavior, business behaviors. So this is their argument.
Yeah, I think it's a big issue. I believe somebody called it, they said, we don't want to see a pandemic of lawsuits after the pandemic we're already in, so we'll have to keep an eye on it. Emel, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wall Street ended higher on Wednesday, with the Nasdaq having the smallest gain. It was capped by a drop in Amazon stocks. Pfizer's up after announcing the new government vaccine deal, and shares of United Airlines dropped after the company reported a loss of over $2 billion for the second quarter. The Dow rose 165 points, or 0.62%. The S&P 500 gained almost 19 points, or 0.57%, and the Nasdaq added nearly 26 points, or 0.24%. June home sales made a record jump after a 3-month slump. Existing home sales increased by 20% compared with May. It's the largest jump since tracking began in 1968, but still lower than June last year. Historically low mortgage rates help boost sales, and a shift to working from home has led to purchases of larger living spaces outside cities. The 30-year fixed mortgage rate is at 2.98%. the lowest since 1971. Economists believe the shift to single-family homes in small metro areas, rural markets, and large metro suburbs could remain a trend even after the pandemic. The median price of an existing home is around $295,000. And nowhere is this truer than in upstate New York. The desire for more space has sent real estate sales outside the 5 boroughs booming.
New Yorkers anxious about enduring another pandemic in the crowds and small apartments of New York City are feeling a boom in home sales and rentals upstate. Real estate brokers and agents describe a booming market recently, since many are now able to work from home. Anil and Joyce Lilly belong to the group of house hunters that are working remotely. They just bought a house an hour north in the Hudson Valley. That way, if the outbreak roars back into the city, they won't be sheltering in their Bronx apartment.
I think the pandemic really caused the glue to hold the commitment we had to Manhattan to fall away.
Although many New Yorkers are taking similar steps, New York City is in no danger of hollowing out anytime soon. The upstate wave looks more like a trickle in a city of over 8 million. With new homes in the region ranging from $200,000 to more than $1 million, they're an escape hatch many cannot afford. But the spike in sales and long-term rentals suggests New Yorkers who endured the worst of the pandemic see the city as less hospitable. Agents say people are now fighting bidding wars over homes that have been sitting on the market for a long time before the pandemic, and new listings are being snapped up fast by buyers with cash.
The U.S. government plans to pay nearly $2 billion to buy 100 million doses of a COVID-19 vaccine. Pfizer and Germany's BioNTech, the companies making the vaccine, just announced the news. A Pfizer spokesperson said they won't get any money unless the vaccine succeeds in large clinical trials and can be successfully manufactured. The deal also gives the US government rights to 500 million more doses. Pfizer said the price for additional doses, if ordered, would be negotiated separately. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services say the potential vaccine would be available at no cost to Americans, but their health insurance may be charged. And up next, German authorities arrested 3 former top executives of Wirecard, including the former CEO Markus Braun. And surprisingly, more people have seen their credit score improve during the pandemic, but that could be short-lived. That and more after the break.
The coronavirus outbreak is the latest wake-up call.
U.S. Senator Ben Sasse put it plainly. The Chinese Communist Party has lied, is lying, and will continue to lie about coronavirus to protect the regime.
In 5 to 10 years, we'll have virtually no manufacturing capacity left for generic drugs. And again, this is 90% of our medicines.
And the world should know, if Hong Kong falls, the whole world falls, okay? Because the Chinese Communist Party is the existential risk of humanity, period.
Since the CCP took power, 80 million people have died from its policies and political campaigns.
They're using our institutions and our norms and our values against us in ways that we hadn't necessarily envisioned towards their own authoritarian agenda.
From the party's great firewall in cyberspace, or to that great wall of sand in the South China Sea.
More repression, more unfair competition, more predatory economic practices, indeed a more aggressive military posture as well.
If we do not meet this threat now, it's going to define our century.
Three former Wirecard executives have been arrested. German prosecutors say the trio are suspected of defrauding investors out of billions of dollars. Former chief executive Markus Braun was re-arrested along with Wirecard's former CFO and chief accounting officer. Braun was first arrested last month over alleged market manipulation and falsifying financial records. The electronic payment service collapsed last month, exposing a breakdown in oversight. For years, German regulators ignored warnings that Wirecard was inflating revenues and profit. Online trading businesses TD Ameritrade and Interactive Brokers are showing positive quarterly results. Stay-at-home traders are driving sign-ups and revenues for the platforms.
E-brokers, TD Ameritrade, and Interactive Brokers added a record amount of trading accounts during their second quarter. Between April and June, revenue trades at TD Ameritrade were up over 62% from the same period last year. That's 4 times more than last year's levels. The major online brokers, Charles Schwab, TD Ameritrade, E-Trade, Interactive Brokers, and Robinhood, have seen new accounts and trading activity surge during the pandemic. The market has been flooded by small investors trading from home. TD Ameritrade's CEO says zero commissions and sustained volatility drove new and existing client engagement, leading to record trading levels. Interactive Brokers says that revenues for the quarter are up 111% compared to the same period last year. They say new signups are behind the jump.
And in South Korea, a gambling treatment center says the number of day traders seeking help for addiction has tripled. Working from home has given them more time for online stock market trading, which is easy to do at home and even on credit. One young bank employee started trading stocks after a friend made a windfall. He had some success but ended up losing the equivalent of $1 million in just 5 days. He went to a gambling addiction counselor for help. Experts say this is a worrying sign of things to come if working from home becomes the norm. They say isolated people have fewer tools to control addictive behavior. South Korea hasn't enforced any lockdown measures, but most businesses are still having their employees work remotely. And did virus aid help your credit score? It has for many people. But economists say it's just a bit of an illusion, and bank loan statistics tell a very different story.
Statistics from Credit Karma show that virus relief payments are improving credit scores for many people. Credit Karma analysed scores from 80 million US users from November to February and from February to May. It found that the number of people who were able to improve their credit scores increased 7% during the pandemic. That's compared to before the pandemic. But economists say the gains are an illusion. Relief programs will end before anyone can get back to work and caught up with bills. And bank loan statistics also tell a different story. Outstanding consumer credit fell 2.4% from February to May. The last time that metric fell was in December 2015. The decline partly reflects less loan demand during the CCP virus recession, but also shows lenders pulling back. Senior loan officers representing 38% of US banks told the Fed they were tightening standards for consumer loans and credit cards during the second quarter. That's up from 14%, more than double from the first quarter. This suggests consumer lending conditions may be getting worse.
Counterpoint says Apple's US iPhone sales were down 23% year on year in the second quarter. Although sales were down, there was one bright spot. Consumers were flocking to low-cost iPhone SE. It caused the sales volume to increase overall through the quarter. Promotional deals and store reopenings helped improve sales of the low-cost iPhone. It even attracted more Android switchers than usual. They make up around a quarter of new iPhone SE users. Counterpoint says it doesn't believe increasing iPhone SE sales will stop people from buying new iPhones with 5G technology later this year. Apple shares were up 34% since the start of the year. And up next, Ford unveils a one-of-a-kind electric SUV with remarkable horsepower. And more people are ordering takeout and delivery now during the pandemic. One restaurant has invented a way to serve their customers without making any contact. Find out how after the break.
When you look at TV networks in America, a soundbite and bite-it-out culture prevails on news and commentary programs. As a Canadian, I'm fascinated with America, and I wanted to offer American thought leaders an opportunity to share their thoughts in a deep dive format where we can explore their ideas together. And so American Thought Leaders was born. The world's most brilliant thinkers believed that open discourse was the key to greatness. However, all around the world, we see that discourse is being stifled and political agendas have subverted media. The Epoch Times launched its Global Thought Leaders program to bring back this great tradition of free thought. As the host of American Thought Leaders, every week I interview some of the most intriguing minds on the most pressing issues of our time. Be sure to check out our new episodes every week.
And what I think is an awesome idea, a new startup website is helping consumers buy products made in America. The company is called Cultivate and is backed by billionaire entrepreneur Mark Cuban. The website lets you search for anything you want and it will give you the results for products made in the United States. So clever. You can also install a plugin for the Google Chrome browser so when you shop online, it'll show you similar made in America items on Amazon. CNBC says Cultivate gets a commission from the sales, but consumers don't pay any extra. The company says it verifies that items are made in America before it puts them into its database. And Ford is pushing the envelope on how powerful electric cars can be. Just unveiled a new racing version of its upcoming all-electric Mustang with 1,400 horsepower, but don't get too excited to get one yourself. It's just a one-off to show the potential of electric vehicles.
Ford wants to be in the fast lane of electric vehicles, so they've been pushing the limits of electric vehicle performance, creating a souped-up version of its new Mustang Mach-E SUV. It's got 7 electric motors that can produce up to 1,400 horsepower. But don't get your engine all revved up to get one for yourself. It's not street legal. It's just a demonstration car that was created to show the potential of all electric vehicles. Ford hopes it'll also help engineers figure out ways to make electric vehicles more powerful. The head of Ford Performance Motorsports says the car is actually based on Mustang's Mach-E SUV that you can buy next year. That one will have 2 electric motors and produce 459 horsepower.
A restaurant in Israel is using an interesting method to serve customers in a safe way during the pandemic. Here's the details.
The owner of Go Noodles restaurants invented a new way for diners not to come in direct contact with restaurant staff. There are no tables, no waiters, no physical contact with another person. The Go Noodle chain operates a system of lockers instead. The food is placed in one of the compartments for customers to collect.
Once the food is ready, it is placed in one of the lockers. You get a text message with a code, and when the food is ready, you enter the code and take your food.
As many restaurants in Israel are struggling to cope due to the outbreak, this method seems perfect for this era of social distancing. But Go Noodle's owner had decided on this business model before there was any hint of an impending pandemic.
I came up with this concept a year ago with no connection to the coronavirus, from a business and financial need. As fate would have it, the coronavirus broke out a few months ago, and this thing became majorly significant.
Doing away with customer service staff cuts costs in an industry where profit margins can be wafer thin. The unusual collection method also captures people's attention because, according to him, they're always looking for something new and interesting. He says businesses need to adapt if they want to survive.
That's the latest business updates for now. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you again tomorrow.